And another fine good morning to all you out there watching. Want to say thank you for tuning in. Today we're going to continue on with our vintage video game systems. Last week we did Atari. This week we're going to be doing Intellivision. But before we get into the show, I hope everyone is having a great Friday morning, enjoying, getting ready for the weekend, get ready to come upon Independence Day. July 4th is coming up very relatively shortly. So hope you all are going out and getting ready for your vacations and things like that. Other than that, we're going to get started here. We talked, like I said last week, we talked about Atari. We talked about my top 10. We talked about Pac-Man. We talked about lots of different games from Atari. But not to be outdone by the Atari system, we got Intellivision from Mattel Electronics. Started in they started in 1977, but they didn't put their first one out until 1979. As you can see, some of the same games. Qbert, I believe there was Frogger, as well as Pitfall, Donkey Kong, things like that. But I didn't own an Atari. Like I said in the last video, my friend down the street owned the Atari, but we did in 1982 for Christmas get the Intellivision and television system from Mattel Electronics for Christmas, probably with 20 different games to go along with it. It was one of the best Christmases that I can recall. I also got all of my G.I. Joe collection. If you know me, I'm a huge G.I. Joe fan, and I also got the majority of my G.I. Joe collection started there, and it just went from then on. So I loved the Intellivision. I thought graphics obviously were a little bit better, especially when we come up to a couple of if you remember the Atari football, just guys bouncing back and forth like this. Intellivision brought football, and we'll talk about here in a minute, brought football to life for me, as well as a couple others we're going to talk about. Again, we're going to talk about my top 10 video games from the Intellivision. If you had an Intellivision, let me know in the comments if you had a favorite game as well. I don't recall a whole lot of people talking about this, so I'll be surprised if anybody even remembers it besides me. But I'm still looking for the actual game system. I know that PlayStation had, or PS2 had one of those retro discs where you had like 30 or 40 games on it, and they did it for Intellivision. But I'm still looking for the actual Intellivision system. So if you're out there watching and you're a vintage guru like myself, or you go hunting for antiques and things like that, let me know. I'd love to find one. Yes, I have checked vintage stock as well, but just some of the ones that I like, but that didn't make my top 10. You have Major League Baseball, which was pretty good. Masters of the Universe was kind of done in the same vein as Defender, where you're flying. You got your spaceship going up and down like this, and he's just He-Man. But this was one of the very first He-Man games that I remember, or it might be one of the only He-Man games that have ever been made. If somebody can fact check me out there, be glad to know that. If you find one, let me know. Venture, kind of like Gauntlet, pre-Gauntlet, before Gauntlet, and Atlantis was kind of like Missile Command. New Atlantis, I should say, was like kind of Missile Command, but I loved them. I played them all the time. We had a lot of Intellivision games because by the mid 80s, they were on clearance, or you could find them relatively cheap, like $5 a game or something of that nature. They weren't very expensive at all. But yeah, had a lot of them. First up in the top 10. Now, one of the funniest things about this system is my dad would play it all the time. Even to the point where I think he played it more than me and my sister did. And one of his favorite games was Carnival. You had a lot of different things, but he was addicted to this game, as well as another one we're going to talk about. man, he would come home from work and immediately go in there and try to get the high score and beat all the levels. And yeah, this was one of his games. He really hated the ducks. The ducks up there at the top, I don't know if you can see very well, the ducks would fly down and try to hit your gun. But this was one of his favorites. And you got the pipes up there. You had, you get your bonus points and your extra points by hitting the pipes up at the top. But this was like a shooting range at the carnival. We all enjoyed this one, I think. Even my mom played this one a little bit. Next up, we have Utopia. This was one of the first strategy games that I ever remember in video games. This is almost like Risk. You're setting up your pieces and you're trying to take over continents. And this was called Utopia. You had little fishing boats out there that gave you money to build up your stuff. You built up your army, as you can see on there, and you tried to invade. Like I said, it's kind of like Risk. Still to this day, one of the very first strategic games that I remember. In veins of this precursor to Heroes of Might and Magic or Age of Empires and things like that. But it's a really good game. I played this all the time. This was one of my favorites. You just had to overtake. You built your capitals. You had money to spend on buildings and things. So it was pretty cool. But Utopia comes in at number 9. At number 8 is Space Hawk. I know this is the best picture I could find for Space Hawk. Basically, again, kind of like Asteroids, but you had your little guy. Instead of a ship, you had your little guy out there in the middle, and he's taking on asteroids and ships and things like that. And you spin him around, and you can use him to boost and fly over to shoot out the asteroids and the ships that were coming to take over. Just like I said, it's just like Asteroids. A little bit better graphics though, and you had like 3 guys, 3 lives that you could go through, and yeah, it was just like Asteroids. But I thought it was better. It obviously in color. Asteroids was that almost that gray or green, and black. There were just no real graphics to Defender, or excuse me, Asteroids. But still one of my favorites. Next up, Lock and Chase. This was Mattel's version of Pac-Man, if you will. Instead of Ghost, you had cops chasing you, and you're the robber, and you're going around getting all of the gold, picking up the money, and then you moved on to the next level. But you could set up little doors to block the cops from getting you. No power pellets in this to take out the cops, but you had to escape them and get onto the next level. But you could use doors to block them from getting you, and it was pretty cool. It was, like I said, it was Mattel's version of Pac-Man. Now, again, granted, some of these graphics here, Pac-Man was probably a little bit better as far as gameplay goes, but still, I love Lock and Chase. I think my sister played this one a lot as well. This was one of her favorites. We talked about the other game that my dad was highly invested in, and bowling was it. Him and my mom both were invested in the bowling, PBA bowling. Like I said in my Atari game, or the Atari Top 10, this was the first time that I ever remember the major pro sports giving their like, or their logo and actually sponsoring a game. That's to me. And again, I'm just barely even I think 9 years old when this game came out. That so I don't my sports knowledge only goes back so far, but I do think that they gave their sponsorship and pro bowling was one of them. My dad absolutely would not quit this game until he bowled a perfect 300, and he finally did. But yeah, it took him a while. You see your lane set up there. You pick your the ball pound that you want to roll, and you line it up and you try to bowl, and then just like regular. This is probably why I gained my love for actual real bowling, was because of this game. Now, I never bowled. I don't think I ever bowled a 300. I don't recall how high I went. I just like I said, I do remember my dad bowling a 300 because he quit playing after that. He wouldn't go back because he didn't want to ruin his score. But I thought this was a really great game. Next up, we have PGA golf. Like I said, man, long before Tiger Woods, long before any golf game came out in television, we had PGA golf. They would suggest what you used, and fairly, at the time, fairly decent graphics. It wasn't like they were, they're not the graphics that we have today, obviously, where we get and we can see our, watch our ball in the entire way. But this was fun. Again, pretty easy. I mean, I wouldn't say it was easy. There were some definite hard holes, always a lot of sand traps. I don't recall me ever doing a really good on this, but I did love playing PGA golf, and so this was a fun one. It still remains one of my very favorite golf games of all time, just because of the nostalgia attached with it, but I do love it. And then next up we have NFL football. Again, I think my brother-in-law and my dad and myself and when on that Christmas night, this was probably the game that was played the most. We talked about the Atari football. Like I said, the players going boop, 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 boop. But this, you had legitimate players. Obviously not all 11 players on the field, but you had a defense. You could call your defense. You could call your offense. You had running plays. You had pass plays, and I ran up a pretty good high score when playing the computer. My friends down the road would come and play this. This was one of this. I think we wore out that was one of the bad things about the Intellivision is that you wore the controllers out pretty fast on them because you're pushing the buttons all the time. And I'll take you back real quick to slide 1, and you can kind of see what the pads look like. They had the numbers, and then you were really wiping out the discs. I kind of liken it to the circular controllers from NES that you could wipe out, and really wear and tear on them. But it was still, football was still one of the best games. Just hit your receiver, or you had across the middle passes. You had flag passes. It was pretty great. And like I said, I ran up the score on the computer quite a bit on this. This was obviously precursor to Madden and what we get with Madden. So it was pretty good. We're getting into my top three. The Beauty and the Beast. Obviously, this is a homage to Donkey Kong. Yet I like this over Donkey Kong from Atari, ColecoVision, Nintendo, whatever we played it on. I still like Beauty and the Beast. You still got to save the girl. He's still throwing barrels. But you could climb up the only way you could climb up was if a window open or window shut. And then you could climb up. If the window was open, you couldn't climb up in that area. And then people would stick their heads out and throw stuff at you from getting you to stop. But once you got to him, you continued up, going level and level and level. The buildings got taller and taller and taller each level, or as you progressed. This, to me, hands down better than Donkey Kong. Hands down better than Donkey Kong. Obviously, we didn't get the iconic Mario going after his girlfriend, but still pretty, in my opinion, one of the best games an Intellivision ever put out. Coming in at number 2, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons, obviously, this was at the height of the Satanic Panic that was in the 80s, where if you played Dungeons and Dragons, you were definitely part of the satanic crowd, which we know is totally bogus nowadays. Um, but this was one of my favorite games. Like I said, number two. It hits the number two spot for a reason. You're in the dungeons. You're searching for treasures. You're searching for the monsters that you have to defeat to get to. And this was called Smoky Mountain Dragon. You had to get to the Smoky Mountain to beat the Smoky Mountain Dragon, and that was your end goal. There was so many different routes you could take. And after you're out of the dungeon, you move off into an open. You're not in the dungeon. You're out on the field, and you have to go through all these different. Every mountain had something for you to pick up and fight with, whether it was the bow and arrow, whether it was a sword. In this game, I will say, the bow and arrow was the best weapon because you could hit from a distance and you could kill just about everything. It would take you a little bit more, and you would have to go find. So you would have to add up on your arrows. But you're going in, you're trying to find the treasure of the dungeon that would help you, and keys. You needed keys to get into certain areas to progress. So you had to find those keys, you had to find the treasure, and move along. So I'm a boy of 9-10 years old, and so playing Dungeons and Dragons on a computer was pretty cool, as opposed to obviously the TTRPG, which we all are still a lot of people are still playing to this day, but still to this day, one of my favorite, still one of my favorite all-time games. So let's get to number one. Number one, hands down, Burger Time is still, no matter where, if I can find Burger Time, I will play it. I'm still trying to find the actual game system for like a stand-up arcade like One Up has. So I will find that one day at a reasonable, I should say, I have found it. Let me say I want to find it at a reasonable price that doesn't break the bank. But Burger Time is so awesome. You run around trying to make the burgers. You salt and pepper the eggs and the hot dogs and the pickles that are chasing you. And you have to start each level and bring them all the way down. So you probably had your bottom buns here. You had your bottom buns at the bottom level. You had your meat and your pickles or your lettuce and your tomatoes, and depending on what other condiments you had to run across them without getting caught and drop them all the way down to build the burgers. That was pretty cool. It's probably, if I had to rank all my favorite games, I had to rank from each system, Burger Time would probably still be top three as far as the games go of my enjoyment. I don't base it on graphics all the time. It's, did I enjoy the game? Did I, how many times did I play it? So I just love Burger Time, and it still holds. It still holds up today. We have it on the little small, those little small like retro gaming systems, the little retro gaming systems that you get at like Target, Target or Walmart or places like that where you can get them in a box. They have like 50 games built into them. So we have that. But I want the stand-up. I want the actual stand-up arcade game itself. And then obviously if I do find an Intellivision, I will get the actual Burger Time and cartridge game as well. So, but yeah, that is my top 10. Next week, we will continue our travels into the video game systems. Next week, we're doing ColecoVision. This is definitely the precursor, however you want to say it, to Nintendo. I mean, ColecoVision didn't last very long because Nintendo ultimately came out a couple of years later. So I think this was just a try. But another buddy that I know up the street had ColecoVision, had a lot of games. So I played a lot. As a kid, it wasn't all about sitting in our houses and looking at Facebook and social media. We actually went out to other kids' houses and played games, played outside, played football on the street. So I definitely played ColecoVision as well. So I will bring you my top 10 ColecoVision Games next week. We will continue this on until I get through all the different game systems that I played or have, at least partaken in. Some of the game systems we will not be seeing. I will be doing one as well as over the handheld Mattel electronic games. If you remember those, the football with the dots. They had baseball and things like that. So we'll do that. Some of the handheld games. Game Boy will be in there. So we got a long way to go on this travel of video game systems. And I'm excited to see. Hopefully, you guys will join in and partake in that. But again, I hope everyone has a great Friday. If there's a television game that I missed that was one of your favorites, please let me know. I don't, like I said, I don't know how many people had it. I know we had it. My friends would come down and play it. We enjoyed it. And so, again, ColecoVision is next week. We'll be having Morning Dash on Wednesday. I haven't come up with the topic just yet. So if you guys think of a topic you would like me to talk about on Morning Dash, let me know in the comments. And I will gladly do it. But I appreciate you guys coming out. Enjoy your coffee, ladies and gentlemen. I got my fantasy football manager cup because, we're getting ready to have our draft in about a month. So I got to start studying up. This will be my actual first time playing fantasy football. So I'm looking forward to it. I've talked about football all my life, but I've never played fantasy football. So here we go. Thank you for coming out today, and we'll see you on the next show. Have a good day, and God bless.